What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Electrix Moto. Today we have the Arctic Leopard XE Pro S, and we're finally out here in the desert. Before we get on this thing and take this through some trails, what I want to do is talk about the first impressions that I've had after riding this bike, some of the pros, some of the cons, and what you can expect if this is your next E-moto. So before we get into the cons, I want to talk about the pros of this bike. The cons will be at the end, and let's just talk about the positives. This E-moto coming in at $53.99 is probably the most robust bike that you can get for the price. It has a 20 kilowatt peak power, which puts it close to the E-Ride SR at coming in at 25 kilowatts of peak power. And the smaller bike that I would also compare this to is the E-Ride Pro 3.0, coming in at 16 kilowatts of peak power. The reason I'm putting this in that category is because, quite honestly, the E-Ride SR and the E-Ride 3.0 are the best-selling bikes right now in the entire E-moto market. So to have this bike come in at a cheaper price point than both of those bikes, but have a middle-of-the-road kilowatt peak power output, I don't think you can really be upset with what Arctic Leopard did when bringing this bike to market. Now, the next part about this bike that we do like, although there are some cons to it, is the KKE forks as well as the KKE shock. Now, this is the beefed up version from KKE. This is not what comes on a standard or light B, so it is slightly more robust and can take bigger hits, which is what you would expect from a bike with a 55 amp hour battery and a 20 kilowatt peak power. The only problem is, last time when we were out here in the same exact location, the first time we brought this bike out and we were riding it, myself and my friend Nate were both riding the bike. We're roughly the same weight, within 4 or 5 pounds, and we were bottoming out this shock on a consistent basis. Now, that was probably the way the shock was set up. We probably had the compression turned down just a little bit too much. Once we made those changes and we took it back through the sand rollers, we hit a couple of jumps, we could still feel that we were taking everything that shock had. So I'm not sure that this is a pro or a con. It is a pro to have good upgraded components on your bike. However, depending upon how you ride, I could see that the shock probably is going to need some adjustment. Maybe a bigger spring rate, a more heavy spring rate would probably even out this bike a little bit and make it capable of taking the bigger hits that you may be used to.
Never give up, I am a fighter. I'm a fighter.
One of the best parts of this bike, period, is something that I didn't expect, and that is the throttle. The throttle on this bike and the response and the delivery of power is the best that I've ever ridden on a small E-moto, period. I am going to go out on a limb, like I said on the first video. I actually brought my Stark today because I want to ride both of these bikes back to back so I can feel the way that this throttle rolls on in comparison to the Stark in real time. Whether you're in the eco mode all the way up to pro, this bike is so easy to control from a throttle perspective. So if you are a person like myself who loves quality components and loves to feel like you're on a traditional bike that rolls on nice and easy, very controllable, this throttle is the one that you're gonna wanna at least try out. Even if this isn't the bike you intend to get, I would absolutely at least put yourself on this bike, test this throttle. And if you have any experience with other Arctic Leopard products, because personally I do not, I wanna know what your take is on this throttle versus their other models. Is this something they do all the time and they've always had a good throttle, or is this a one-off and not what we can expect long-term from Arctic Leopard? This bike comes with true 4-piston calipers and .4 brakes, which makes all the difference in the world. After getting an opportunity to ride the bike and actually being on the trail and the place that we're gonna go in the next video, we're gonna test this bike through the same exact conditions as I was in last week. The brakes did not fade. I did not find myself at the end of the day grabbing a whole handful of brakes and having trouble slowing down. Now, the bike is brand new. I'm sure that's gonna change over time, but having appropriate brakes, especially on an E-moto with 20 kilowatts of peak power, is absolutely important. Whether you buy a bike that has good brakes or you put good brakes on the bike that you buy right away. It's something that we always stress. Having an appropriate brake makes all the difference in the world, and going fast is just as important as slowing down. Last two things, I'm gonna group these two things into one, is the 55 amp hour battery that comes in this bike. I think that is really the sweet spot for a bike of this power. We were able to take this bike on our previous trip, about 26 miles of riding it all day long. Both myself and my buddy Nate were on this bike, so 26 miles is what we got. We literally got back to the trailer with 0% on the gauge. So I don't know how it was still running, but what I will say is once you get down really low in your battery, underneath 5%, the bike almost stutters. As opposed to throttling the power, it almost feels like it's getting caught up on something. So it was definitely an interesting feeling, something we hadn't felt before. But 26 miles of range out of 55 amp hours is pretty much the sweet spot. While we're talking about range, there is a clicker on this side, your throttle side. It has an on and off switch. That is your regen. So if you want your regen on, you click it on. If you want your regen off and you just want to coast to a stop or use your brakes to stop, you turn it off. I think that button is probably one of the most important buttons on this entire bike because it makes managing your regen extremely simple, because some people like it and some people don't, and having a switch to control it makes my life a lot easier. All right, so let's talk cons. There aren't very many of them. Some of them are small, more of minor grievances, but I want to start up front with your brake line cable. If you have this bracket too far down on your forks and you're completely compressing your front forks, you are going to ruin your fork guard. That's something we did. It was an accident, an oversight. When we installed that brake line bracket, we had it down a little bit too far. The forks were compressing and completely ruined our left front fork guard. So it's something to keep in the back of your mind when you're putting your bike together. I do not love the way this seat goes on, simply because this threaded bolt is going to cause a problem and you are going to strip it if you're not careful. But besides that, the seat is just not comfortable. I don't know what kind of foam they use, but really it is only a small piece on the seat that actually has any density to it. The rest of it is really uncomfortable, and for long rides, I could definitely see that being a problem, especially for somebody in the 220 to 250 pound weight range. So I made this mention in my first video about this bike, and that was prior to actually riding it the way we've been riding it. And the narrow bars for me do not feel comfortable. They are 1.5 inches more narrow than other bars that you get on the market. Warp 9 are 33 inches. These are 31.5 inches wide. It feels more narrow. You feel more compacted on the bike. I'm not a huge fan of that. That would definitely be a con for me. I also mentioned in the first video about this screen kind of rotating back and forth and not being very flush, or didn't grab the bars very well. We did end up putting electrical tape under here, and now that screen isn't going anywhere. So that is a plus, but you shouldn't have to do that on a brand new bike. So my last gripe is the plastics. Somebody had mentioned a comment on our last YouTube video, if those plastics kind of feel like they're grabbing on you when you're squeezing the bike. I did not have the answer to that originally because I had not ridden the bike the way we've been riding it, but these plastics do kind of come off a little bit right here. And what you'll find is if you're squeezing the bike with your knees like you're supposed to be doing, you kind of feel like not only are you sliding off because it's a very smooth surface, but you almost feel like you get caught up on these plastic shrouds. So I do like the fact that all of the marks on the bike are completely removable because I could just put new plastics on the bike and I don't have to worry about seeing frame scratches. So that is a plus. However, the biggest problem is when you're really gripping the bike with your knees and you're going up a hill or you're in a steep incline, you kind of feel like you're etching back a little bit, or at least that's the feeling that I got while I was riding this bike, but by no means is it the end of the world. It's just all the little things add up and it's something worth mentioning. All right, so I know that you're probably tired of hearing me talk. However, I think all of these things are important, especially when a new bike comes out. Everybody is really excited about the bike, and that's rightfully so. However, I do believe having the full picture before you make a purchase and figuring this out on your own, that could always be avoided if you do a little bit of research, and hopefully this is helpful. If you guys have any particular questions that I did not address, or you have some things that have happened while you've been riding the bike, either good or bad, please leave those in the comments, because I would love to get more information so either I can duplicate the issue you're having, or I can try to remember to be aware of the fun that you were having that maybe I'm not experiencing because something is set up on the bike inappropriately or whatever it may be. But we appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe to the channel so you can come along every week for the new videos that we do, and we will see you guys on the next one.